On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Brock Faber likened getting hit in the neck with a slap shot to what?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, and we are your daily Minnesota Wild podcast as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we'll get you up to speed on the latest injury concerns for the Minnesota Wild, including Brock Faber taking a slap shot to the neck, which sounds like so much fun. We'll also take a look at Matt Boldy's recent 5-game skid, tons of penalty minutes, and we'll take a look at some of the reasons that Boldy's production has dropped over the last 5 or so games. And we'll get you set for tonight's matchup against the Utah Hockey Club. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild. Hope you enjoyed our bonus episode today with Alexis Pearson talking PWHL. And I just want to start the show by just continuing to ask for listeners' patience. The getting the routine down packed, it's a completely different routine than I had previously been used to, and it's just an adjustment period. It is something that I'm really trying to get nailed down and ironed out, and I'm hoping here that it won't be too much longer before we'll be able to get something consistently going again. But for right now, you know, it's a give and a take. It's a tug of war. It's just trying to make sure that that energy is being allocated where it needs to be at that particular moment. And for me, mostly just right now, trying to make sure that sleep isn't getting sacrificed too much with some longer days over the last few this last week, and you know, the holidays coming up as well. So appreciate everybody's patience. I know the posting schedule has been all over the place. I'm hoping that we'll be getting back to regular here before too long. So thank you everybody for continuing to tune in. I expected that this would be the case, going from just sitting at a computer for most of my day to now having an actual structured morning routine. Expected that this would be the case, and it just takes a little while to kind of get used to the flow. So we're going to just continue to roll with it. With that being said, unfortunately, no postcast tonight. We will have one for you tomorrow night against Winnipeg, but I have more sports on the calendar tonight that will be going on this evening, and won't be getting done until late. So no postcast tonight, but we will have you covered, and I will update weekly what we've got going on for postcasts going forward, so everybody knows when to tune in. Tonight was a change, but going forward, we'll try to stick to that as much as we can. That being said, Matt Boldy clearly is going through a little bit of a rut. Over the last 5 games, Matt Boldy's numbers: 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 total points, which that's not the bad part of it. The part that is a concern is the fact that Boldy has 12 penalty minutes in the last 5 games and just 11 shots on goal. And if we back that up, we start to notice a little bit of a pattern here. You back it up to the entire month of December so far: 1 goal for Boldy, or 2 goals for Boldy, 6 total points. He's got 14 penalty minutes in those December games. And so after a just rocket start for Boldy, we have started to see him cool down a little bit over the last several weeks, which has coincided with the Minnesota Wild's goal scoring seeming to dry up a little bit as well. And I think it stems from a couple of potential possibilities for what could cause this being a problem. Let's wind the clock back to December 3rd. That was the last game that Joel Eriksson Ek played against the Vancouver Canucks. Now, he didn't have a point in that game. He played 21 minutes, and if you'll recall, he got hurt in overtime against the Canucks, and he has not played in a game since. Well, let's look at Matt Boldy's numbers from December 4th to right now. 7 games for Boldy. He's got 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 total points, but he's a -4, and he's got 14 penalty minutes. And all of his production has come on the power play. He has, or actually, I take that back. His production has been all at even strength. Now, the power play production for the Wild has really dropped off considerably. But it hasn't been clicking on the same level. And Boldy, 19 shots on goal in those 7 games. So he's shooting just over 10% since Joel Eriksson Ek went down. And I was kind of looking as to like what is causing just this nosedive in just play on the ice. Like not even the production, just the overall play on the ice for Boldy. And I think it can kind of be led down one or two roads. Number one, I think he is missing his most common line mate quite a bit. Natural stat trick went and crunched the numbers for Boldy and Eriksson Ek together as line mates so far this season without anybody else. Just Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson Ek. And the difference between those two playing together and Boldy playing with others is very, very noticeable. Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson Ek together in 22 games this season of 5-on-5 play. Those two together, now that's not counting Marcus Johansson. That is just Boldy and Eriksson Ek. In the 8 minutes that they've played together, they have a Corsi percentage of 86.67. So that is, we talk about the Corsi numbers. And if you have a Corsi for percentage above 50%, that is a good indicator that you are possessing the puck quite a bit. And that should theoretically lead to you getting better opportunities to score goals. The more you possess the puck, the more you theoretically should be able to pot some goals and to get some on the scoreboard. So 86% is astonishingly good. Very, very good. In those 8 minutes together, and this is just this year, 5-1 is the shot difference in favor of the Wild. 1 goal for, none against. And the Wild have an expected goals for percentage when those two are on the ice of 97%. Let's subtract Joel Eriksson Ek and do the same thing with Matt Boldy and Marcus Johansson. Those two have played 58 minutes together without Joel Eriksson Ek. Their Corsi for percentage is 39.45%. That's not great. They're not possessing the puck really a ton at all, which is leading to a lack of ability to get the puck in the net. They're being outshot 33-25. The goals are 2-1 in favor of the opponents. And the goals for expected goals for percentage is 41.78. That's with Matt Boldy and Marcus Johansson. Now, looking at some of the other, let's take a look at Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and Johansson as well. That combination In 143 minutes this year, they have a Corsi for percentage of 59%. So in between, they have a shots for advantage of 79 to 47. So a sizable advantage in the shots department. And the goals is 7-3 in favor of Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and Johansson. So +4 in the goals department in 143 minutes. The expected goals for percentage is 57%, so that's slightly above average. But the big talker is goals for and goals against, and they are +4 in the goals department as a trio. So what is the common denominator there? Well, the common denominator is Joel Eriksson Ek not being in the lineup, because I think it can be boiled down to as simply as Joel Eriksson Ek draws attention in at the front of the net and allows Matt Boldy to have more space to operate. And you think about it too, with nobody like Joel Eriksson Ek, Matt Boldy's drawing all the attention from the opponents. He is the one that is getting singled out on that line because, well, that's what I would do if I was the opposing coach. So that is one possibility as to why Matt Boldy's numbers have stagnated here over the last probably 3 weeks. The other possibility that was brought up on X is that he is trying to play through an injury. Would explain the just skyrocketing number of reach-type penalties that he's had over the last month, and would explain the shot not being able to hit with the same level of success that it was early on in the season, which could certainly be true. But I think the one that I'm zeroing in on is that as much as we talk about Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello and the chemistry that they have together, I think Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson Ek have developed quite a bit themselves. So not having somebody who you have developed a really solid rapport with, not having somebody in that grouping, or having like let's even just say an upper echelon player, because the numbers for Marco Rossi, Matt Boldy, and Kirill Kaprizov this year, their goals are 4-1 advantage for the Wild, 80% goals for percentage. Expected goals is 69.88%, and their Corsi for is 58.2%. Shots are 34-22 in favor of the Wild. So I think Matt Boldy just being kind of on an island by himself is another part of this. And this is something that's, as a young player, he's going to have to learn, is when there's nobody on the line with you, you got to find a way to kind of get it done. Marco Rossi did it last year. Kirill Kaprizov has had to do it quite a bit. But I think that's the big thing. I don't know if it's necessarily an injury for Boldy. I think it's more so just missing a key component of his line and drawing extra attention against teams that can afford to send extra attention his way. But it's going to need to get ironed out. Even on the penalty side, too. Like, if he can even just cut the penalties down, that's a step in the right direction. But you can't just keep committing 2 or 3 penalties a night with as bad as his penalty kill is. Like, it's a recipe for disaster for this Minnesota Wild team. So hopefully Boldy can get things ironed out, because the Wild are going to need him to navigate through this stretch with injuries. Although from the sounds of it, that stretch of navigating without injuries may be close to coming to an end. We'll talk about the latest updates for key Minnesota Wild players as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pixmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week on Prize Picks, I am taking a look at the hockey board, looking at Jack Hughes for more than 4 shots on goal and Artemi Panarin for more than 1 assist. It is so simple to make my picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly at Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder tonight, I will be on the road, and so unfortunately getting back late, so no postcast tonight, but we will have one for you tomorrow for the Winnipeg game. So don't worry about that. Apologies for those that were hoping to tune in tonight, but there's not a ton I can do about that. I'm going to be getting back probably close to midnight. So we'll do one tomorrow, and I'll get a set schedule going for the rest of the year, so that we can make sure to work them in as much as possible. This is just kind of become part of the new normal. I know we made a huge effort to do every game, but that was when I wasn't doing nearly as much as I am now. So we will continue to push forward, and we'll be excited to chat about whatever happens in tomorrow's game against the Jets. Injury updates for the Minnesota Wild. Michael Russo tweeting earlier today, Yakov Trenin and Joel Eriksson Ek went out onto the ice towards the end of morning skate. Filip Gustavsson is also out there, so Minnesota Wild players could be returning soon. I'm sure with the break coming up, it makes sense to be careful with all or some and wait. And I think he's right. This is something that has been brought up in a couple of postcasts since Joel Eriksson Ek got hurt. It's going to be really interesting to see if this Minnesota Wild team continues to chase points or puts the bigger picture first. The bigger picture, obviously, is that your team is substantially better off if these players all come back healthy and 100% ready to play. Jonas Brodin, that one shocked me a little bit, but I'm, I guess, not surprised that he has been able to step in like he did and seemingly not miss a beat. But it's a situation with Joel Eriksson Ek. I think you worry about that one a little more because of, A, how much he is relied upon by the Minnesota Wild, and B, just the style of play that he plays with. I think there were some questions as to whether or not a player like Joel Eriksson Ek could be considered injury prone. I would maybe hear that argument out if the types of injuries that Joel Eriksson Ek was sustaining weren't so freakish. He breaks his nose against the in the game before the early on in the season. Breaks his nose. Tries to come back with a visor, can't do it. Misses a couple of games because of the swelling, and there are blood clotting issues that you don't want to have people dealing with in the air on an airplane. That is just kind of a freakish circumstance in my mind. Obviously, the broken leg from a few years ago blocking a shot, that's a freakish circumstance. It's not like Eriksson Ek is dealing with hamstrings or knee sprains. This injury, I believe, though, is more of a knee because he took kind of a knee-on-knee contact. But a lot of these aren't chronic type injuries. That is, I guess, where I would put the term injury prone, is things like hamstrings or quads. You see it a lot in football. Like somebody's got a tight hamstring and they're not able to suit up for a game. I would classify that more as injury prone. A lot of these are just in the heat of the moment type intensity type injuries, but it does underscore how important these players are to the Minnesota Wild for them to be successful. Not only do you have Jonas Brodin, Jake Middleton in the midst of a career season, did not get an update on him, but obviously having surgery on, we're all assuming it's a hand, even though we've only really been told upper body. But that's another freakish one too. That's not necessarily an injury prone type play. Is sticks his hand out to try to block a shot. That's kind of a in the game type thing. So I don't necessarily think that if you wanted to say prone to injuries, that'd be one thing. But I don't necessarily think injury prone is the right way to classify it. If that makes any sense. I don't even know if it does. But also from Joe Smith, Bill Guerin said on his weekly WCCO appearance yesterday that Brock Faber is okay. He doesn't think Filip Gustavsson will be back this weekend. Trenin not necessarily back this weekend either, but also mentioned that he loves what Liam Ogren is doing in Iowa. That's why he's there, Guerin says. They will get him up at the appropriate time. Maybe not now. Let's talk about the Brock Faber thing a little bit. He takes a slap shot to the neck. Let me repeat. He takes a slap shot to the neck. And this was hugely concerning for pretty much the entirety of the Minnesota Wild fan base because it's Brock Faber. But Faber, as he does so often, just shook it off. And he told the media, he said, well, yeah, initially it was hard to breathe, which explains why he was sent to the hospital. Initially it was hard to breathe, but now it just kind of feels like strep throat. And I'm like, you are brushing a slap shot to the neck off as strep throat. That is next level warrior stuff if I've ever heard it in my life. There's no way I'd be up and doing this show if I took a slap shot to the face or at all. I'd be laying on the couch doing a show from the couch if that sort of thing happens. But thankfully then it looks like Brock Faber avoids anything major because that would have been another blow for this Minnesota Wild team. And it's a Wild team. Bill Guerin went out and acquired depth in the offseason to try to help what happened last year not become as big of an issue. And it's not necessarily the quantity of injuries for the Wild. It's the players who are injured. Filip Gustavsson, your number one goalie, not just the number one on the Minnesota Wild roster, but he's probably he's probably a top 3 goalie in the NHL. You can't just replace that. Jake Middleton, one of the top 10 defensemen in blocks this year, having arguably a career season. You don't just replace that. And Joel Eriksson Ek winning nearly 50% faceoffs on the season with as many faceoffs as he has taken. You don't just replace those types of things. So it's all about, like, that's what makes the start for the Minnesota Wild all that much more important. They bought themselves an opportunity to be able to weather some adversity and not have to be trying to crawl their way back into the postseason. Like you can survive a lull in December. You can't necessarily survive a lull in November or at the end of the season. So the fact that the Wild got off to 2 really, really good months is going to help them be able to navigate through these injuries. Now, with as warrior-ish as Joel Eriksson Ek is especially, it won't shock me at all next week if he finds his way into the lineup. Maybe against Chicago, But I do like Russo's theory about just holding players out until after the Christmas break. Just allow them a little extra time to make sure that they're fully 100% ready to go, so that you're not dealing with anything nagging. That would be the absolute worst thing that could happen to this team, is to have nagging injuries that you're trying to mitigate in addition to major ones. So won't see those players this weekend, but hopefully getting very close to being able to return very soon. The Minnesota Wild take on the Utah Hockey Club tonight. We'll prime you up for tonight's matchup against the HC as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the air, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Minnesota Wild take on the Utah Hockey Club tonight. And for the Utah HC, their only loss in the last 6 games was to the Minnesota Wild. So Utah playing some pretty good hockey right now, 15-11-5, and 9 points back of the Minnesota Wild so far this season. And if you look at what Utah has done since their first game of this hot stretch, which coincidentally was December 7th, the Utah, I guess call them the Utes, I suppose. Utah is just continuing to put some solid play together here over the last 3 weeks. They are currently second in the NHL over that span. They are 5-0-1. They got 11 points. The only team with more is the Ottawa Senators. They have averaged 4 goals per game over that span. They've scored 24 goals in the 6 games. They have given up 14. So that's 2.33 goals per game. They got a 41.2% power play in that span, and their penalty kills at 87.5%. And faceoffs, who cares about faceoffs? 45.7% for Utah as a team since December 7th. Now, if we want to go from a skater's perspective, since December 7th, well, Utah certainly has plenty of names to be able to rely upon to try to pot some goals against Marc-Andre Fleury here this evening. Dylan Guenther and Clayton Keller both with 4 goals in the 6. Logan Cooley also with 8 points in the last 6 games, 1 goal and 7 assists. Kevin Stenlund with 4 goals as well. And it is a Utah team. They have scored 7 power play goals in the last 6 games. Have I emphasized enough concerns for the penalty kill in tonight's game against the Utah Hockey Club? Because it doesn't matter what the Minnesota Wild do. They just continue to give up power play goals. Like they're just handing them out as quickly as they can get rid of them. The Minnesota Wild, by extension, in that same time span, they are 2-4, have scored 13 goals, so that's 2.17 goals per game. They're giving up 25 goals in the 6 games, over 4 goals per. The Wild power play is at 18.2% in those 6 games, so showing some signs of life. The penalty kill, however, 53.3%. That's an actual number. 53.3. How's the penalty kill doing in the month of December, you ask? 65. How is the penalty kill doing since the start of November? 71. How's the penalty kill doing overall for the season? 72.7. We're going in the wrong direction, folks. Every month it seems like it gets worse. And I don't know what to do about it. I don't know if there's anything you can do other than get rid of every single player that has had any sort of impact on this penalty kill whatsoever and either trade or release them. I'm obviously talking tongue-in-cheek. But it is crisis levels bad. And all these teams that the Wild have played here over this rough stretch, they all have power plays that are capable of finding the back of the net. So the Wild are going to need a big performance from Marc-Andre Fleury tonight. A bounce back after the game against the Florida Panthers. And it was that same phrase that has been used quite a bit, is it wasn't all Fleury. He didn't certainly get a ton of help, but it was bad defense and bad goaltending together. Like, just put them hand in hand and chalk them up to be the exact same thing. We will see if the Wild can bounce back, get off the mat. And again, my expectations for the rest of the month of December and until some of these key players come back is to just make sure that you don't have any other major injuries happen. Just get through this stretch. It's a test of the mettle. This is the first major adversity of the season that this Minnesota Wild team has faced. And they certainly have the fortitude to be able to handle it. The question is, does that translate on the ice? And time will tell here this evening. But that'll do it for today's episode of Locked on Wild. Appreciate everybody tuning in and continuing to be patient as I continue to get this new routine down. And we're getting close. Like we're getting to the point that I'm going to be able to start hammering out just a consistent schedule. We'll get the episodes back to first thing in the morning. So I just appreciate everybody's patience and just appreciate everybody continuing to tune in here as the season rolls on. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Locked on Wild has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.